Hello, I'm Sam Macdonald. I'm a professional wildlife sculptor, which I've done for the past 17 years. My work is almost predominantly just fish and aquatic creatures, anything that lives in or under the sea. And I'll give you a quick tour of the workshop here. There's drawings being done, and there's some of the fish. As you can see, I work almost totally in metal. This is a piece that's just been plotted out just now. And some other pieces being worked on. I also really like submarines. This is a turbot piece. And then beside it, this is called Quandary. This is called Quandary, and it's really studying how the fish, how creatures react when they're under threat, and comparing it with how we react. And really, it's natural to bind together, to come together in a protective ball, or like a bait ball here with a fish or a herd or flock or swarm. But in this pandemic, we've been advised that we can't do this. So we mustn't all gather together like that. So I've got these ones kind of breaking the rules by gathering together, and then a sweep of other ones going past off into the deep and the gloom and the unknown. Light has become a big feature to me during lockdown, and more, and it becoming more and more dramatic. I think it's about hope, and I think lighting the pieces gives them a bit of drama and a bit more hope, as in this piece, where the fish are again just heading off into the dark. I was brought up on the island of Lewis, and then after college I lived on Orkney for 20 years.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you didn't work with stone when you were in Orkney.
Mm-hmm. My granddad, he could split a stone, he could pick it up and he'd hit it with a hammer once and it would split exactly where he wanted it. But he had amazing kind of skills. And my great-great-grandfather worked on Melsetter House in Hoy, which was an arts and crafts house. He was one of the masons that was taken over from Orkney to Hoy to do that. So yeah, it was funny that I didn't do. I think I just never had the opportunity to do actual stone. And I like metal. I like metal almost straight away.
How long is a piece of fish, literally, but on average, how long does it take you to create a piece?
That's really tricky, because when you're hammering scales, if you're doing, say, 5 big salmon, it takes you kind of weeks to do the scales. So, and it would drive you mad. So I don't do them all at the same time. I always have in the workshop, I usually have about four pieces on the go. So some are at the drawing stage, some are at the manufacturing, some are so I can choose every day what I'm doing. Like if I'm feeling really on form and good, then I'll do engraving, because then you only get the one chance at like a big sheet of brass or that, which you can't make a mistake on. If I'm not feeling so good, then I'll do scales, where you sit and tap all day and listen to audiobooks and the radio. So it's quite hard to say, but in one of the little herring, which is about that size, I counted how many hammer blows there were, and there was 987 hammer blows in one fish. So when you're doing a big shoal of fish, there's like a lot. It's funny, the craft side, my grandfather and his fathers before him, they were all stonemasons. So the craft side was always going to be strong. And when I went to college, I wanted to learn a craft and the techniques more than the expressive side, because I thought that'll do me well after. And I would have loved to work in wood, but wood's got too much life of its own, like it'll split, crack, or do other things. Whereas metal, if you apply the right power, the right heat, then you can manipulate it however you want and it stays. So yeah, I love all the tools and I love working in metal, and it suits the fish. It's kind of hard and kind of the kind of glossiness, etc. It seems to suit the fish. One of my tutors in college, he wrote a book about metal colouring, and he opened my eyes to the fact, because I think people always think metals, you know, they're very much standard colours, but he opened my eyes as you can do almost any colour. If you have the right chemicals, the right kind of techniques, then you can do anything. So that's kind of developed. Over the years, the colouring has developed. I've always loved rust, and I think that comes from Lewis with all our tractor implements lying around rusted. And also maybe my ideas of colour, my dad just used to buy any paint that was on offer for the tractor implements. So they were often all lilac or different colours. So I think that opened my mind as to that things could be any colour too. I include sometimes in my pieces of the shows, we sometimes in Lewis and in Orkney, I used to see the phosphorescence in the water. And I've included that in the pieces. I've got a chemical that I can put, so that when the lights go out, the piece will have a cloudy kind of glow to it with the shoal in it. And I often sell those pieces, and I don't tell the people that they'll do that. So they'll get a surprise one night when they switch the lights off and this gradually appears. So I quite like doing that.
Because the colours are so associated, I think, with the islands. If you could, if you have an island dye.
Yes, I think so. I think very much in the compositions of the pieces and how everything is in layers and big skies, big seas. So, and I like simple compositions. And I'm much more drawn to northern colours. I'm not very keen on the kind of rich colours of the south of France or things like that. I'm always drawn to northern artists like Munch and people like that. And what's his name, the other Norwegian, the one who's painting just now. Yeah, that it's I'm much more drawn to the colder aspect. And it definitely has a big influence on the pieces, especially the compositions.
Originally, you were probably a boy who went out loch fishing a lot.
Yeah.
The headspace and the solitude of loch fishing isn't unlike how a sculptor works.
Mm-hmm. And I think fishing and sculpture are, you go in the same mindset where everything else is kind of cut off, and where you've got this lovely kind of peaceful, kind of but active setting. We grew up right beside, like where we were in back, it was beside Col River. We were the last house into the moorland, and then there was the river. The river was right next to us. So I was always in the river right from before I went to school, and started fishing, and then going up to the lochs, and even snorkeling in the river to see what was underneath. So I always had a real fascination with the fish and the environment that was around me. And I love, you know how you said about the heather and the difference between Orkney. Well, I love the heather. I love that kind of environment. So my favourite pastime is fishing in the moorland. So a good hike to a small loch with beautiful little trout. That's my ideal of, that's my real ideal fishing. Kind of.
And that's where your original interest, because it's not just, you don't just sculpt fish, you have a knowledge and an interest in conservation as well.
Yeah, very, very much so. When we were in the Col River had really been fished out of salmon. And I remember being quite unhappy about that at the time, but being just small. And seeing on the river, seeing otters, seeing eels, and thinking that the eels had travelled all the way from Sargasso Sea to the little kind of peaty burn in Lewis. Like, all this really amazed me, and it was huge influence on me. And the insects and all the life around the river as well was always fascinating me. I could spend hours and hours beside the river. So it's been quite nice that the works developed. When I left college, I was doing really abstract, big rusted steel sculptures, which were probably more akin to the wrecks and that are in Orkney. And having, since then I've dived them and that. But when I went to Orkney and started fishing again, and I just thought I'd make a fish for the house, a mackerel. And it was friends who said, oh, can you make us one? So I started. That's what put me back to, it was going back to fishing that got me back into something that I really loved, and I kind of combined them both. And since that's happened, it's enabled me, like when a fishing lodge, say in Iceland, commission a piece, I always include in the price, I include a week of fishing there and things like that. So I've traveled kind of to Iceland, Bahamas, Mexico, different places, all, which has been great. And it's been great to see the fish and the environments and all that. But then still, with all that fishing and amazing, great fishing, I still love the moorland lochs. That's still what I'm drawn most to, as long as there's no midges.
You also go diving and you go wild swimming.
Yes.
Okay. Have you been going wild swimming during lockdown?
Very much so. Yeah, yeah. And me and my daughter, we wild swim, and we determined to swim right throughout the year. So yeah, we swim when there's snow on the ground. We've gone into the sea. You don't stay in too long, but you don't do it with a wetsuit or anything. But 5 years ago, I got diagnosed with MS, and it seems to be a thing that's very good for me. Like I feel great after it, and all your body feels kind of alive. So yeah, I like it. I like the cold shock is, I think, very good for me. My mum and dad used to swim all the time, and when they lived in Golspie, the house backed onto the sea, so they'd go into the sea all the time, and we swam in Lewis all the time, and I think it is good for me.
Has your illness affected your work? How you work?
Yes, very much so. The illness is also quite interesting with the Orkney and connection and the Lewis connection. You know, MS is quite prevalent compared to the rest of the world. We read up a lot about it, and a lot is to do, well, there's a lot of theories about metals. And I think I was probably very careless when I was younger in metal coloring and chemicals and things like that, which you're not very careful when you're young, because you think, well, how, it's got cumulative effects. But then when you hit your 40s and that, suddenly these cumulative effects could catch up to you. So I started changing. I got new respirators. I'm very careful with the chemicals I use now. So it very much changed what I did and how I did them. And I started using resins to coat in the end and things like that, which are all much safer. Yeah. It has affected, the energy isn't as high as it was. So I'm probably more choosy about what I do.
Now, this might be a ridiculous question and a very naive one, but do you have a favourite fish?
It's a very good question. And I could go on for hours about which ones I like. My favourite fish to look at is a little brown trout, which is very golden from the lochs. So it's got that beautiful, almost like gilt underneath it. One of the favourite fish to catch is probably a bonefish, which is incredibly fast and incredibly powerful, and it's hard to catch. So I think bonefish are kind of up there with what I like catching. The salmon, I really love the salmon, but it's more the whole thing of it traveling 10,000 miles and it being a thing of beauty and coming back to the place. So I like the whole idea of the salmon. But actually looking, they are beautiful looking, but they're not maybe as beautiful as a little trout. To catch a salmon, it's not unnatural, but a salmon, people don't really know why a salmon takes a fly. There's theories about it, but it's not got the logic of a trout. You present the trout the right fly at the right time, and it'll take it. A salmon, it's almost like it's gifted itself to you if you catch it. So I'm quite interested in that. I love seeing sharks. I love seeing the speed of sharks. So when I'm fishing abroad and you've got a fish on and a shark comes for it, I get as excited about seeing a predator like that as I do about fish I'm catching. So yeah, so those, and I also love, one of my favorite fish is the hatchet fish, which was I did for the cover of Saltfish 40. And it's the one, the really deep sea fish. It's a little fish, but it's got light cells along its back and underneath it. And it registers the light that comes down on top of it, and it reproduces it underneath it. So the bigger predator fish underneath, they don't see a silhouette, so they can't hunt it. So it's like a stealth fish. And I always think that whatever man comes up with and thinks he's very clever about, nature's done it just millions of years before. So I love that kind of fish, that hatchet fish. So yeah, I'll stop there because I could go on and on.